Hey folks, it's Brian with my final submission, whatever, piece of my review of Runequest, Role-Playing in Glorantha Manuscript, the preview edition from GenCon 50. Okay, so the very last chapter, in between adventures. Obviously the biggest thing is improvement, because everybody wants to see, improvement over time, whether it's their skills or their stats, characteristics, or what have you, runes, passions, etc. All those things can increase over time. So this whole improvement process for skills and passions, as has been mentioned previously, you can increase over 100%, and we'll talk about how that all works here. It's not quite like RuneQuest 2, and I have to admit I'm a little more, I feel better about the RuneQuest 2 version, and I'll talk about that when we get to that piece. But okay, now it also states that runes are not normally increasable over 100%, but they don't ever discuss, how you can actually do that if it's possible. Okay. Experience. Okay, there's training, research, and experience. Those are three ways you can increase stuff. And experience is obviously the most obvious one. That's where you get your skill increase checks. Those check boxes on the character sheet. If a skill has a checkbox, it can increase through experience. There are some things like reading and writing, knowledge kind of stuff that you have to be taught. You can't just, figure it out. Well, I guess you could. That'd be research. I don't know, maybe. But the idea is there are certain things that experience doesn't really help you out. Okay. Now, experience checks are not automatic. And it talks about when you're successful with a skill, the GM can, that's one of the powers of the GM. The GM can grant or deny a skill increase check. And now when I was doing RuneQuest 2, well, in RuneQuest 3 for that matter, I tried to make it more mechanical instead of just what do I as a GM think is appropriate. So I had at that point, I was vacillating back and forth between if you get a critical, you get an increased check, or if you do a fumble, you get an increased check. The whole concept of do you learn more from doing it exactly right or from doing it completely wrong? You learn from your mistakes. Well, not always, right? Okay, so, but I did that, and I would allow multiple increase checks. As you're doing a skill, it's going to have more and more opportunities for increase. It's just the way I played. I also, when you start off in my world, you don't start off with these guys that are 75, 80, 90% with their skills to begin with. I don't like that. You don't get to see enough increase, and we'll talk about that here as we go through this increase stuff. So okay, so it's not automatic. A GM awards or denies those. That's the type of GM again. If there's no box, again, no increase. Okay, making the roll at the end of each season is when you can make your experience check rolls. No issues there really. You have to roll percentile dice. You add your category modifier. So if it's an agility skill, you add your agility modifier. If it's a knowledge skill, you add your knowledge modifier. And you have to roll above your current score. And if you do that, you get to add either 1d6 or you can choose just 3%. Now, the entire game, you want to roll low, except for experience checks. You want to roll high. So I would just turn this whole thing around, and we'll talk about that with characteristic increases. What your current skill is, minus 100, gives you your percent chance to increase. And then, of course, you can modify it then by the category modifier. Now, in RuneQuest 2, you didn't use your category modifier to modify your chances to increase. It was, you always had your intelligence as a percentage, as a chance to increase. And I liked that. It made sense to me. But, category modifiers, is there some sense to that? Of course there is. Okay, so how do you exceed 100%? Well, a 100, or in my case, a 0-1, always succeeds. And again, because you have a category modifier to the die roll, in which case it'd be subtraction on my case, you can always roll really low, right? But this does give you a statistical maximum of 100% plus your modifier. Because at that point, when you get to that percentage, you only increase that 1% chance. per season. You know, I remember with RuneQuest 2, you get to that rune level of guys, and you've got, people with, 110, 125, it happens. And when you got an intelligence of, 10 to 13, that's a 10% chance every single time it's still going up. So, I'll figure that out. Okay, experiencing between adventures. Okay, so whenever you're not adventuring, you're doing your occupation back with your clan or whatever, right? So you get to select 4 occupation or cult skills for an experience check roll. But if you're adventuring for more than half the season, you don't get to do that. So there's this whole metagaming kind of thing where there's 8 weeks in a season. So if you do, 3 or 4 weeks, but not 5, you get your experience checks from adventuring plus your culture occupation checks. So yeah, there's some playing around with that. Okay, training. And training and research are essentially the same, it's just how you go about it. For training, you can train a skill or a rune. For a skill, you need an instructor. For a rune, you go to the temple. Again, at the end of the season, you get to add 1d6 minus 1, or 2% in this case, to that skill or rune. And there's a note here. Training always gives you an increase. And most skills and stuff are limited to training up to 75%. Again, they don't give any real statistics on what doesn't, but that's okay. Okay, if you do training, you have to pay for it, obviously. And there's a different price between common skills, professional skills, and rare skills. And cross-referenced with your current percentage. So it maxes their, got the word, shoot. 1 to 25 is one value. 26 to 50 is another one. And it increases as you go up in skill because it's harder to train, that kind of thing. Okay. Now the teacher-student relationship quantum, there, that's the word I was looking for. Quantum units. Okay, the teacher-student relationship in RuneQuest, it's a formal relationship, not a transactional relationship, which means you can, after a training session, end up with a loyalty to your teacher passion of 60%. Okay, research is self-training. That's the difference. When you're doing training, somebody's doing it for you. If you're researching, you're doing it yourself. If you're going to do research, you can only do 1 rune or skill each season. And it's not automatic. You have to make an experience check roll, which we talked about earlier, the differences between abilities. And then for research, it's 1d6 minus 2 or 1%. Okay, increasing characteristics. Power and charisma are a little bit different, and there's some special rules for those, but essentially, you determine what your species maximum, if you're familiar from Quest, you know what that is, max plus min kind of thing. Okay, so then they go right into power increase instead of all the other stuff. I don't know why I put that afterwards. But a power increase roll. You can increase your power through spell use or spirit combat. If your percentage chance of success is 95 or higher, there's no chance of experience increases. Or power increases. Sorry. Okay, because your situation has to be under stressful, and if you're that good with it, it's not that stressful. But they only talk about, in RuneQuest 2 and 3, it was always whenever you had a power versus power roll to overcome someone else's power for the spell take effect, that's when you got a power increase check. They just say stressful situations. What does that mean? Okay, now for spirit combat, though, they talk about if you're successful in an attack or a parry during spirit combat, that will give you a power increase check. Okay. Power increases also during worship rituals, and this was discussed earlier during worship stuff or during character creation or something. When you do a worship service at a temple or a holy place during a holy time, the presiding officials get a power increase roll. On the high holy day or during sacred time, all participants get a power increase roll. Good to go. Okay, you can train your power. Generally costs 500 lunars. You pay that to the temple. You have to spend a full day and a full night each week for the season. And then at the end of the season, you get to make a power increase roll. Well, power gain rolls is what they call them. So they talk about making increases on a power gain roll, whatever. Okay, so power gain rolls, again, is your species maximum minus the current, that value times 5%. That's what you need to roll. That or less, not that or more. And then you get a 1d3 minus 1 or a 1 point increase in your power. So do you feel lucky or not is what it comes down to. Okay, now the other characteristics. All of them, except for intelligence, can be increased through training or research with the GM's approval. Okay, intelligence normally cannot normally be increased except through magical means. Again, they don't go into detail what magical means that are. I'm assuming there's a GM's manual is going to be coming out and they'll discuss all that stuff in there. Okay, to increase a regular physical stat or charisma takes 2 full seasons, not just 1 season, but 2 seasons. And while you're training a characteristic, you can have no other training or research. So that limits what's going on. If you're going to train a characteristic, it costs about 500 lunars, and you increase, because you got a trainer, it's automatic, 1d3 minus 1 or the 1 point again. If you're doing research, you need to make that roll. Species maximum. They state specifically here, not including your rune characteristic modifiers. I didn't go back and look and see what that was all about. But if you have rune characteristic, they give you modifiers. I do remember that during character creation. So you don't add that to your species maximum. Okay, makes sense. Then you subtract your current value, and then that times 5% or less, and then you get to add a d3 minus 1 or 1 point. Okay, charisma increases and decreases. These are separate from doing any training or research, and again, it's at the GM's discretion. But essentially, you get a +1 for any of these things. The first category is good, showy, or magical objects. If you got stuff, you increase your charisma. If you are a god talker, or a rune priest lord or lord priest, or a shaman, any of those categories, levels, experience, occupation, not even occupation, it's a level kind of thing. Any of those things, you can get a +1 to your charisma. And then there's this leadership category. If you're successful in a leadership during a military expedition or some kind of community crisis, you can get a +1. However, if you're unsuccessful in that leadership, you have to make a charisma times 1% roll, or you will lose 1d3 points of charisma. Interesting. Okay, Sacred Time. This is the last part. And this is similar to Pendragon's winter phase, right? You've got all these things that happen at the end of the year. You have worship, hero questing, harvest, income, aging, family roles, and omens. I won't go through all those, but some of this is kind of interesting. The harvest. Making your harvest roll involves the previous year's omens, any raids or invasions that occur, the previous year's harvest, if you have any hero quests, and all those things will modify your harvest result, which can be anything from famine to superlative, and all those things give you a modifier to your income roll. That's what all this is about. The harvest gives you a modifier to your income roll. Okay, income. What is that? Well, remember we have that baseline income from our occupation. Well, at the end of the year income, you need to roll on your relevant occupation, on a relevant occupation skill. And they give you a table there, which is pretty obvious from the character creation piece. You make your roll against that skill. If it's a critical, you get 2 times your base percent or base income. If it's a special, you get half again. If it's a failure, it's half. If it's a fumble, you get 0 income plus you get debt equal to 1/2 your base income. Good to go. If you are gone more than 3 weeks per season, this is the end of the year, so you got 5 seasons there, you get a -20%, and that's a cumulative factor. So if you are gone adventuring more than 3 weeks every season, that's -100% on your roll. If you're gone all year, obviously you don't get to make a roll. Okay, after you make your roll for your income, you have to pay your cult taxes and your standard of living. And then they have this manage household portion of this. If you have tenant properties, and they talk about this, I know in the Vasana adventure things they talk about, because she gets tenant properties and that kind of thing. You do this stuff for each hide. Generally, you're given 5 hide worth of land to be, a noble kind of thing. But anyway, if you have tenant properties, you have to roll your manage household skill, or you know, they discuss this, but I won't. If you've got family that you are using as part of your retinue that have managed household skill, specifically if it's higher than yours, you can have them do it, right? Yeah. Typical situation is you get married. If you're a guy, your character's a guy, you get married, and your wife has a high managed household skill, you let her take care of that stuff, and you go adventuring. But all this stuff, um, tenant properties is all determined surplus income from tenant properties, because the tenant properties, half of it goes to the tenants because they got to keep themselves alive, and then the excess then goes to the manager. Okay. There's an aging table. It begins at age 40, and you lose from 0 to 4 points of size, dex, strength, or cons. There's 2 tables that you roll on them, and there's a chance of doing 0 on each table, so it's not really that detrimental, but obviously things can happen because you're rolling every year, right? And then you have family rules. This is kind of cool. They talk about your own personal marriage and the 8 different categories they have for that, which tie the whole gender sex thing at the beginning, and that's a little left for me, but I can see some management in there. And there are certain, I don't want to call them occupations, certain situations. For example, if you are female and you are a initiative priest of, is it a series? I think it's a series. It might be like Hermione, but those positions are male, and so you wear a fake beard because you're pretending to be male. And then there are certain religious cults, or Nalda, I believe specifically, maybe one of her subcults, that are specifically female. Now, if your character is a guy, they generally make him a eunuch when he becomes an initiate, because you're emulating a female persona, that kind of thing. Okay, but anyway, I digress. So you've got your own personal marriage, and then you've got your own children, and you've got a survival table for them. And then there's the family events table, everything from death, marriage, birth, blessings, to nothing happens, to a scandal. And then each of these have got their own tables on who in your family was the one who died or got married or had a birth, that kind of stuff. And then there's a table for blessings on what happens there, and scandals, what bad things happen there. And then there's an appendix with just a calendar of holy days. And this was kind of confusing for me at first, because I'm looking at it and it's got each of the rune weeks cross-referenced with the day of the week, and then cross-referenced, and Yum has a holy day on the fire day of fire season, kind of thing, that kind of deal. But there's 2 tables. There's one on one page and one on the other page, and they seem to duplicate, but then they're different, and it threw me completely off. But as I was looking at it again this morning, it's just duplicating. There's the 5 seasons on there. So, Discord week is listed there 5 times. So, it all makes sense if you pull it all together and just make one big long thing. If they had a category, if they had a column at first that had the season, and then listed the season, and then you have each of the weeks, it would have helped clarify that table. So that's it. Runequest, role-playing in Glorantha, the manuscript. Oh, is this 24 different sessions of going through this stuff? I've got the bestiary and a sample cults booklet. I'll probably do the bestiary at least. I've also been thinking about doing a character creation video just to see how it rolls and how I would modify all of it. Because I think first off, the first thing, it's not like you and your friends are all about the same age, because you are, right? Well, when you're younger. If you're going through school, right, all your friends are in your same grade, maybe a grade above, maybe a grade below, that kind of thing. Especially as you get into high school. But it's currently set up that everybody's 21. Come on, guys, not everybody's 21. Now, are you limited? Yeah, you've got to be an initiate, because you got to be, an adult to be an adventurer. Excuse me, right? So I'll do some dice mechanics, minimum 16, average 21 kind of thing. Okay. That's how I would do it. Which means that then the calendars kind of shift based upon your age when you begin adventuring, which which may cause some issues with their whole calendar scaling thing. But that also means that the younger people don't have as many years of previous experience to deal with, that kind of thing. Plus, I'm looking at modifying the actual percentages because, like I said, I think beginning adventure should be 50 to 75 range, in there somewhere. I like that 50% thing. That's one of the issues I have with 5th edition DD because you don't have 50% chance to do things. You've got like a 2/3, 66% chance. Oh, that doesn't sound so bad though, does it? But there is a difference there. That 2/3 success all the time versus 50% chance, all the time or most of the time kind of thing. So, and if you start around the 50% range, and you've got training up to 75. So that first, from 50 to 75, that experience arc is exponential. You go up quick, but then everything starts to peter out. But you still have increases. So I feel that as a player, you can see a greater amount of increase at the beginning of your play. That's just how I like it. But that's me, my way. You do it your way. In the meantime, happy gaming. Ciao.